Will, talk to me.
ABC Tuesday.
They took his daughter. She's coming home alive.
Will Trent, the series critics are calling powerful must-see TV, continues to thrill.
Shouldn't we strategize before we go in there?
If we screw up this case, a cop killer walks free.
With the riveting conclusion to a 2-part season premiere.
GBI!
Help me!
Get down!
Will Trent, all new Tuesday on ABC and stream on Hulu.
This episode is brought to you by Unstoppable. Discover the inspiring true story about Anthony Robles, who defied every expectation to become a national wrestling champion in Unstoppable, a new original movie from Amazon MGM Studios and director William Goldenberg, evoking the excitement and camaraderie of classic sports dramas and thrilling wrestling matches. Unstoppable features an all-star ensemble cast, including Jarrell Jerome, Jennifer Lopez, Don Cheadle, Michael Pena, and Bobby Cannavale. Watch Unstoppable now, exclusively on Amazon Prime Video.
¿Hablas español?
Sprichst du Deutsch?
Kan du norsk?
If you've heard that sound from Babbel before, I bet you do. Babbel is the science-backed language learning app that actually works. With quick 10-minute lessons handcrafted by over 200 language experts, Babbel gets you on your way to speaking a new language in just a few weeks. With over 16 million subscriptions sold and a 20-day money-back guarantee, just start speaking another language with Babbel. Right now, up to 55% off your Babbel subscription at babbel.com/Spotify podcast. Spelled BABBEL.com/Spotify podcast. Rules and restrictions may apply.
Welcome on in to another edition of Eye on the Enemy, powered by the Eagles Pinpull Network. I'm John Stolnis from Bleeding Green Nation. Follow me on XN Blue Sky at John Stolnis. Coming up, Eagles, Rams, NFC divisional matchup this Sunday afternoon at Lincoln Financial Field, 3 o'clock Eastern Time. The Eagles with a chance to get back to the NFC Championship game for the second time in 3 years, as they are just 2 steps away from playing in the Super Bowl once again. But they have a game Rams team coming to Philadelphia to try and keep the Eagles from doing just that. The Rams, of course, Super Bowl winners just a few seasons ago. So it should be a pretty fun afternoon here on Sunday afternoon at Lincoln Financial Field. Coming up, I'm going to be joined by Mark Burns of the Rams Up podcast, part of the Fans First Sports Network, that of which you hear this fine podcast, and we'll get his thoughts. We'll go take a look at get an eye on the enemy from Mark as far as what the Rams are doing. Last week's win against the Vikings in the wild card round and how he sees the Rams attacking the Philadelphia offense and defense. Lots of good stuff to get to as we break down the key matchups, everything you need to know about the Los Angeles Rams, the Eagles' enemy this week, right here on Eye on the Enemy. And joining me to talk about this game here on Sunday afternoon, the Eagles and the Rams, Mark Burns, host of the Rams Up podcast, part of the Fans First Sports Network that you hear this fine podcast on. Mark, welcome to Eye on the Enemy. How are you?
Good. Hey, glad to join you. I love talking about my Los Angeles Rams, and this is it's an exciting matchup. Probably a little more exciting for you guys because you certainly look like you have the upper hand, but hey, our Rams are gonna give it a shot for sure.
Yeah, we're gonna get into it for sure. And of course, you know, these two, everybody's been talking about it all week. These two teams met just a few weeks ago. The Eagles took care of business 37-20 in Los Angeles, a game the Eagles really dominated, especially in the second half as their physicality really seemed to sort of wear down the Rams in that game. Saquon Barkley had the game of his life, of course, 255 yards on the ground, 47 yards receiving. But you know, Eagles fans here, we know what we did. We want to focus in on what you guys did, especially last week against the Vikings, because certainly I think I want to get into how the offense played over the last few weeks of the season, but starting with last week's win against Minnesota, looked like a dominating performance as we watched it on TV. The young defensive line really got after Sam Darnold. The offense did plenty against a good Minnesota defense to put some points on the board, and it was a pretty easy victory for the Rams the whole way through. The game was never really in any doubt. As you look back on that game now here a few days later, though, do you look at that game as kind of like a Rams domination or Sam Darnolding? You know what I mean? Like eventually the Sam Darnold worm turned up in the last couple weeks of the season. As Eagles fans, it looked like a little bit of both.
Yeah, I don't know how much you can put on Sam Darnold there, the way the Rams defensive line was dominating. And I think there might have been a little bit of maybe it was to the Rams' advantage that the Lions played them the week before, and the Lions pretty much did the same thing. And the Rams' defense, especially their defensive front, I think is at this point even stronger. And what's happened to the Rams this year, it's really interesting. Going into this year, we thought the offense was just going to be really, really good. The offensive line was set, some really good receivers, Matthew Stafford, and our defense is going to take a while to get going with a new defensive coordinator, really young roster. And that's kind of what's happened, is that there was times this year the defense just looked kind of horrible. Marvin Harrison, Juwan Jennings, a couple of other receivers just torched us, and then Saquon Barkley. So I can't really, tell you exactly what happened along the way, but I think at some point this young defense, a bunch of rookies and second-year guys and a first-year coordinator started to figure it out and started to put it together. And I think the Vikings just got the Rams defense at a bad time. I don't think their offensive line is anything special. And, Jared Verse, Braden Fisk, Kobe Turner, those guys are really, really good football players. So, Sam Darnold just caught the Rams at the wrong time, I think. I think the Rams had some really good coverage schemes to take away Justin Jefferson as well. So I think all of that combined was a perfect storm for Sam Darnold, really.
Yeah, Rams defense, 9 sacks and 40 pass attempts against the Vikings, 82 sack yards in that game. The Vikings went backwards 82 yards due to sacks in that game. Pressured the quarterback a little over 52% of the time, blitzing 20% of the time, or just shy of 20% of the time in that game. Aaron Jones held to 48 yards, 3.7 yards a carry. And the LA defense, you mentioned it, has been playing really well as of late. They've allowed 10 points or less in 4 out of the last 5 games, and of course just 9 points last week to Sam Darnold and the Vikings. But as we know, these two teams played each other just a few weeks ago. The Rams defense did not look great against the Eagles offense. And I guess the question we kind of want to know is what's different between now and then, because I keep hearing some national folks who are picking the Rams to pull off an upset here on Sunday afternoon, which is certainly within the realm of possibility. What is different about the Rams right now? Because I keep hearing that they're playing better now than they did a few weeks ago when the Eagles caught them. And as I look back, I remember going into that Rams game thinking, well, the Rams are playing really well at the moment as the Eagles are going in there. So what's the difference between now and then?
I'm not sure I can put my finger on it. I think it's a lot of little things. They early in the year, they were not good tackling well, and they've improved in that regard. And overall, the run defense has been better. And Omar Speights may have a lot to do with that. He started against the Eagles the first time, but he hadn't been starting very long. He's a undrafted free agent linebacker, and I think he has really started to play well. I think the secondary, the safeties especially, have improved their play. I think it's just a lot of little things. And you know what? We haven't been going up against Saquon Barkley on I'm sorry, I always pronounce his first name wrong. I got to limit myself to just say Barkley. No disrespect intended. I just always say his name wrong. But Barkley, we haven't gone against Barkley on a weekly basis either. So I have no expectations that we're going to limit Barkley like we have limited some of these other guys. I think it would be a win if we kept him under 100 yards. I expect him to do his damage. I think, not really going off on a tangent here, maybe you wanted to get to this later, I think both teams are probably going to have a strategy of holding onto the ball as long as possible, limiting, and that's what the Rams have to do definitely, is limit the number of possessions the Eagles have and don't let them just drain the clock and finish with touchdowns. We just have to don't let Barkley break off 70-yard runs. Did he have 2 of them against us?
Yeah.
4 and 5 yard runs, we might be able to survive that, but not these, these big gashing runs. And I think Chris Shula, I can only guess, I'm not in their locker room, but you can kind of expect how this might have gone down, a young rookie defensive coordinator. And he may be preaching his philosophy and his strategy for weeks and weeks and weeks, and at some point it finally takes hold and the players start to get it. That might be what's happening here with these Rams. But, that said, this is a different beast they're going to be dealing with, the Eagles offensive line and Barkley and Jalen Hurts. The Rams are not the best at defending mobile quarterbacks. That's something they struggled with. A lot of missed tackles. They seem to bring a lot of pressure, but don't get the quarterback, don't bring him down as often as they should. So, I can't put my finger on one thing that's caused this improvement. I think if I were to guess, I think it's just a young defensive coordinator and a young team finally figuring it out.
Yeah, and speaking of the young players, Braden Fisk leads the team with 8.5 sacks. Kobe Turner, 8 sacks. Byron Young, 7.5 sacks. Jared Verse, 4.5 sacks at team high, 18 quarterback hits. He's not endearing himself to Eagles fans.
I heard about that.
He coming out saying he hates Eagles fans. Certainly left an impression back in week 12 when these two teams met. So it'll be interesting to see his reception in Philadelphia on Sunday afternoon. But that all being said, I mean, I don't necessarily want to break down, the X's and O's of what each team is going to do in terms of game planning. But certainly, I mean, you look in the game a few weeks ago as well. A.J. Brown had a big week. No Devontae Smith in that game for the Eagles. The Birds' offense came in a little bit shorthanded without Devontae Smith, but A.J. Brown had 109 yards receiving and a touchdown. The Eagles threw the ball well early in that game against the Rams also. But obviously, you mentioned that Saquon Barkley really destroyed them in that game. So how do you think they're going to approach the Eagles this time around? Like, are they going to key in on trying to stop Saquon Barkley? And if they do that, if they're trying to really focus in on the run game and really try to focus in on stopping Saquon Barkley, what does that do to this? How does that affect this young defensive line that really just kind of wants to pin their ears back and get after the quarterback?
Well, I think the Rams are going to have to focus on Barkley. That has to be the focus. And I think Akilla Witherspoon, who is questionable for this game, I think he's the perfect cornerback to try to limit A.J. Brown. I assume that would be the strategy. It may have been the strategy last time, but he has been playing really well. And that they have no choice but to try to limit Barkley, especially with the weather conditions, and let Jalen Hurts try to chuck the ball around if that's what it comes to, and take their chances with that. And I think I think they're going to have, if it were me, and I'm not a football coach, but if it were me, I would be telling this defensive line to stop the run first, and if Hurts is in pass mode, to be very disciplined in your approach, and don't give up the edge, don't give up any gaps, and make him be patient and throw the ball. If we get to him, we get to him. I don't think sacks should be foremost on our mind in this game. It should be stopping the run and don't let Jalen escape, because that's probably one of the most frustrating things for our defense all year long, is bringing tons of pressure and the quarterback leaks out and converts a 3rd and 16 on you, stuff like that.
Yeah, those are backbreakers. I mean, those are the plays that lose you games, and it's really, really tough when you have to endure them. You mentioned the Akilla Witherspoon A.J. Brown matchup. Those two matched up against each other when Williams was with the Steelers back in 2022, and A.J. Brown had a game where he went for well over 100 yards receiving. But it is interesting that A.J. Brown, in his Eagles career, I think is averaging around 40 receiving yards per game in the playoffs. He's had one game, the Super Bowl against the Chiefs, where he's had a game above 100 yards receiving. The rest of the time, he's been very, very quiet here in the playoffs. And he was very quiet last week against the oh gosh, who did we play last week? Flew right out of my head. The Eagles playing the wild card round last week against the Packers.
Tampa Bay?
Wow.
Packers. Oh, the Packers.
I kept thinking Falcons. Clearly not the Falcons, but it just...
that happens when you're on air and you're trying to pull a name or something out of your, and it just, you get brain freeze. And when I'm recording, you can hit pause and go, what the heck? But I feel for you.
Not this time. Well, obviously the Rams defense has their work cut out for them, but the strength of that team is certainly that young defensive line. Jalen Hurts is going to have to get the ball out more quickly or break containment. The passing game for Philadelphia really struggled a week ago, and as you watch the all 22, you look at the routes and you're just wondering, what the game plan really was there. It was a very conservative passing game. My guess is that the last time Eagles fans were talking about how bad the passing game was, and it was after the Panthers game earlier in the year, they came out and decided to throw the ball against the Steelers and threw it all over the place very well. So I wouldn't be surprised if the Eagles actually put the ball up quite a bit in the first half against the Rams and try and take their chances. And the Rams don't blitz a whole lot, generally speaking, correct? I mean, they really just kind of want to get pressure with their front four.
Yeah, they usually don't have to. Well, typically they'll have, they'll send Byron Young and Jared Verse, so it could, or Michael Hoyt, so it could actually be a 5-man rush. Mm-hmm. And recently, they, as you saw in the win over the Vikings, they sent their secondary a couple times. I think it was the first time in Rams history 2 cornerbacks had a sack in the same game. It might have even been an NFL record. I forget, but. And they also blitzed Quentin Lake at least once. But that's an anomaly. It may have been to deal with the Vikings or to expose the Vikings. I'm not sure. Yeah. With the Eagles' offensive line, that presents another problem. And I should mention, Quentin Lake, who, his dad played for the Steelers, Carnell Lake, UCLA guy. He is really one of the best kept secrets in the NFL. He's an incredible player, team leader, and he made a bunch of plays in that opening round. So don't be surprised if you hear his name called a little bit.
All right, well, let's flip the script here and let's take a look at the Eagles' defense against a Rams offense that, as looking back again, played very well against the Vikings a week ago, but in the weeks leading up to that, I mean, they didn't play their starters against the Seahawks in the final week of the season, but against the 49ers in week 15, they scored just 12 points. They won 12-6, but scored just 12 points. Against the Jets in New York, they scored just 19. And then in week 17 against the Cardinals, they scored only 13 points. And so, it's obviously about more than just those 3 games, but if you're looking at kind of the trends coming into the playoffs, what is your take on the state of the Rams offense? Because if you look at the point totals, with the exception of last week's game against the Vikings, has the Rams offense been struggling? By the point totals, it would seem like it is.
It's really kind of incredible. You got this, mastermind Sean McVay. You got Matthew Stafford, who I think is just an incredible quarterback. Kyron Williams, one of the best red zone running backs, especially. He puts the ball on the ground a little bit more than we prefer, but a stud running back. Puka Nacua, I think, is a top 5 wide receiver in the NFC. A fullback playing wide receiver. He can do everything. An offensive line that is healthy once again. Havenstein, our right tackle, missed the first game against you guys, but he's back. And so what is the problem? And it's really hard to put your finger on. I think they've become very predictable, somewhat conservative in some games. I think they abandoned the run early. I think McVay, if he gets in a situation where it's not going the way he wants, he'll just start chucking the ball around when it doesn't make a lot of sense. And I think we've seen a couple of games where he's gotten back to, the creative mad scientist that we expect from him. But in most games, it seems to be, just kind of a dull, predictable offense. And what's really hurt them, I think, and I really hate saying this, but Cooper Kupp, I think, is really, his play has degraded a bit this season. And, he's everybody's favorite Ram. He's just, the Rams have a history of very, very good wide receivers that are also team players. That you go down the long list of the great Rams wide receivers: Isaac Bruce, Torrey Holt, Henry Allard, Cooper Kupp, Puka Nacua. Now they don't need the spotlight. And Ram fans love all these guys, and it's kind of a bummer to have to. I think it's basically been socialized across all Rams content creators that, maybe it's time they, get a guy like Jordan Whittington more involved, or even Tutu Atwell. But that's probably a really hard move to make for Sean McVay, but we may see it in this game, or maybe Cooper Kupp has been dealing with something, and this is the game we see the old Cooper Kupp. I mean, I think he has 10 catches over the last 5 games, something like that. He's had 2 games where he only had 1 reception, and that's a big deal for this offense because it's really Puka and Kyren, and Tyler Higbee coming back has been a big deal, and he looks like he's good to go. But if they have all their weapons and Cooper Kupp is his old self, I would feel much better about this offense's ability to put up a 30 spot. But we just haven't seen it for a number of reasons. I think it's McVay's predictability and Cooper Kupp not really being his old self.
Yeah, a few weeks ago when these two teams played, Cooper DeJean did a pretty good job on Cooper Kupp in the slot. Puka, the two Coopers matched up there. Puka Nacua got his. He had a good game against the Eagles, but largely speaking, this outstanding Eagles defense, which finished number 1 in the NFL in yards allowed, one of the best pass defenses in the NFL with lots of good talent back there. The Eagles, of course, don't have Nakobe Dean, who's going to be out for a long time, and that's a big hit to this Eagles middle of the field defense. We'll see how it affects them in the run, stopping the run game. Kyren Williams, of course, as you mentioned, rushed for nearly 1,300 yards, scored 14 touchdowns this year. Really a great player for Los Angeles. But I'm just curious, like how you see this Rams offense attacking this Eagles defense. There's not like the Rams, the Eagles don't really have a star on the defensive line. They generate good pressure, but really this has been in Vic Fangio's first season here in Philadelphia, a whole team effort in terms of the line getting some pressure, getting enough pressure. It dramatically improved linebacker play this year with the addition of Zach Bond and Nakobe Dean, and of course Bond's still healthy and wreaking havoc in the middle of the field. And then the secondary has been vastly improved this year. So if you're Sean McVay, how are you approaching this Eagles defense? You mentioned earlier ball control to try and keep the Eagles offense off the field. Are you really focusing on Kyren Williams early in this game?
Well, if you look back at the first matchup, I don't know what the play calling was on that first drive, but they moved the ball really well, got down to the Eagles 16-yard line, 1st and 10 from the 16, and Kyren fumbled. Their second possession, I could be wrong on this. I think this is how it went down. They moved the ball down to, I think it was the Eagle 23 or in the teens, and they had a 4th and 3, or was it a 3rd and 3? They threw an incompletion, but there was a holding call, and the Rams were going to go for it. And then they accepted the penalty, and the Rams missed the field goal. So I think this offensive line, which is underrated, they got some big boys. It's a big physical offensive line now. Not as good as the Eagles' offensive line, but they're no slouches. They got some good players up there. Bo Limmer, the center. And Kevin Dotson, he's a beast. Lyric Jackson plays really well on the left side. They can move the ball on the ground. They just have to decide to do that. They can move the ball on the ground against anybody. They just can't get frustrated and to give up on it if it doesn't work early. So I expect them to do the same thing and mix it up with some passing. They're not gonna. It's not going to be 3 yards and a cloud of dust with this offense with Matthew Stafford back there. But they can move the ball on the ground, and they just have to try to do it and stick to it. And if it doesn't work with the weather and everything else they're dealing with, punt it away. They got really good special teams. Punt it away, play defense, take their chances with the next possession. Don't get gashed. Make the Eagles earn their points. And when you get the ball back, play some hard-nosed football. They can play that style on offense. They really can.
Well, then you've mentioned the weather a couple of times, and it's a big conversation here in Philadelphia. It looks like we might get some snow in Philadelphia in the second half of this game. If you're looking at kind of, some of the non X's and O's reasons why this game could potentially favor the Eagles, you have a Rams team that's coming in off a short week, right? I mean, they played on Monday night. They've got to travel from the West Coast to the East Coast in kind of an early window game, although 3 o'clock Eastern time, it's close enough to 4 o'clock Eastern time. I don't really consider that a big factor. But this weather, It's going to be very cold. There's going to be there could be some snowy conditions in this game. I know there's a thought process out there by some that that inclement weather, that snow, can maybe neutralize a superior team or a more talented team's ability to control the game. But there's also that if the Eagles are reliant on the run game, and if that's their strength, playing in the snow would seem to be something that would benefit the Eagles in that regard. So I think there's two schools of thought on who the weather benefits more. As you look at it, how do you see the conditions on Sunday afternoon affecting the Rams?
Well, it's not ideal, and it does favor the team with the better running game. It's definitely to the Eagles' advantage. I don't put a lot of stock in the short week thing, especially with McVay. I think he's 11-0 on short weeks. He's also on the winning side on East Coast games, if you're looking for trends. But, what I always look at is, people say, oh, it's an LA SoCal team. They're not going to be able to deal with this. I look at the roster and see where these guys are from, and it's not like they all grew up in Orange County, right? So it's still Eagles' advantage, sure, but I don't put too much weight on that. If there's going to be probably some turnovers you would expect in this game, does that mean the California guys are more likely to fumble than the Philadelphia guys? I'm not sure I buy that. But the biggest factor here is the running game. The running game's going to be less impacted than the passing game. And even though the Eagles' pass defense is really good, Stafford's not going to be able to resist typically to chucking the ball around. I think Jalen Hurts would probably be fine handing off and running around all day long. Matthew Stafford's gonna take his shots regardless. So there's that. But I think the Eagles, if you're going to move the ball against the Eagles, it's going to be on the ground as well, right? More likely than the passing game. So another example of McVay having to be willing to go to the run and stick with it. And even if they get down 10-0, early in the game, stick to the run, stick to your plan, and try to pull this out.
All right, before I get your prediction on this game, give me one reason, the main reason why the Rams will win on Sunday afternoon from where you sit.
Well, I'm going to give you a really, vanilla softball, naive answer, probably. I just feel like this team is, if you follow the Rams and you have your finger on the pulse of this team as much as fans can, they're kind of a team of destiny. They just have that feel about them. They have a really strong culture here. It's just incredible. I don't think I would take the Rams culture in that locker room from the ball boy up to the president over any team in the NFL without a doubt. It's really incredible, and it's really inspiring to watch how this team takes care of business and how they treat their players, how they treat players going out the door, how they treat players coming in, with a couple of exceptions, Cam Akers and Ernest Jones coming to mind. But for the most part, just a super strong culture with great leadership. Sean McVay and Matthew Stafford are leaders of men. And that gives them an edge. It really does give them an edge. It may not be enough to win, games like this, but they're good guys to have on your side. That's for dang sure. And you asked for my prediction. I'm a homer, and I've picked against the Rams a couple of times. I picked the Bills over the Rams, and the Rams pulled that out. And this one, I'm picking the Rams, but take it with a grain of salt. I'm not a. Okay. I'm not approaching this level-headed. I'm approaching this as a Rams fan. And if you ask me off camera, I'd probably say, yeah, I don't know, man. This is going to be tough. This is going to be tough. But I officially am picking the Rams in a low-scoring game, 20-17, something like that. But take your shots. Call me an idiot. I get it. But that's how I'm rolling.
We don't do that here, Mark. This isn't, we're not in the upper deck, with a GoPro taking video, of the Eagles fans, that's not what we're doing here on Eye on the Enemy. So we respect your opinion.
I want to mention before we finish, I was this close to being an Eagles fan. I was actually, my mom was from the Fishtown area. Okay, yeah. Is that what it's called?
Yeah.
And I was born in South Jersey, if you know where Ariel is.
Yeah, yeah.
And
Yeah.
we moved to California when I was a month old. So I'm not technically a California native. I'm a New Jersey native, but I that's all I can tell you about Philadelphia. I went back there once when I was very, very little. But my mom's father actually worked at Connie Mack Stadium back in the day.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, so I got some Philadelphia ties.
Yeah, you got a little bit of the blood in you, and that's good. That's good, Mark. That's what you're a friend of the podcast now. All right, we're all it's a fraternity. We're all brothers. We're born in the area. Like there's always that connection, man.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, listen to the Rams Up podcast, everybody. Mark Burns, host of the Rams Up podcast. You can get that Apple Podcast, Spotify, wherever it is you get your podcast, to keep an eye on the enemy and know what the Rams are doing. That's the place to do it. Hey, Mark, thanks for joining me here on Eye on the Enemy. Really appreciate it.
Hey, thanks a lot. It was a lot of fun.
All right, well, let me give you my prediction on this game here first. And look, I respect what Mark is saying. I think Mark knows that in his heart the Eagles are going to win this game. And what's been bothering me this week about what everybody's been saying about this football game is, everybody talks on these national football shows, give me what team do you think can pull off the upset? And most of the folks that I'm coming across, I'm hearing taking the Rams over the Eagles in the upset. Now, I can understand that. I can understand because there's really no upset in Bills-Ravens. Each one of those teams that's a coin toss game, right? I think the Ravens are actually favored as a road team against the Bills, against Josh Allen, the MVP of the league, which is crazy. So those two teams are pretty even at this point. I don't think anybody is thinking that the Commanders are going to go into Detroit and upset the Lions. That would be a monster upset. And then the Texans, I don't think anybody thinks the Texans are going to go into Kansas City and beat the Chiefs. So what are you left with? You're left with Rams and Eagles. And there's just no logical reason for anyone to pick the Rams to win this football game. If you're being serious about it, if you're looking at the matchups, if you're looking at the playing conditions on Sunday, if you're looking at recent history, everything out there tells you that the Eagles are the favorites. They're 6.5-point favorites in this game to begin with. It's at home. I do think playing on a short week is a big deal. I do think that this Rams team and Matthew Stafford, who never plays in cold weather, and they certainly never play in nasty elements, how they're going to be able to move it and move the football in this game and score when the weather gets bad. I just, I know the Eagles' passing offense last week didn't look great. Do we not remember just a few weeks ago when A.J. Brown, after the Panthers game, after they won a game against the Panthers, was saying, what's wrong with the offense? He said passing. And remember, there's a big brouhaha. Jalen Hurts and A.J. Brown don't like each other anymore and all that. What did the Eagles do the following week against the Steelers? They came out and they threw the football with tremendous efficiency. And then they leaned on the run late in the game. So to say that this Eagles, I think Jalen Hurts said something earlier this week too. He's like, I do what I'm called on to win the game every week. And if you looked at the tape from last week's game, it was a conservative game plan the entire way. There was no scheming anybody open. He hit that back foot and it would seem like Eagles receivers were running right to a defender, a Packers defender, stopping right in front of them and turning around. Like it was like every pass play was like that. Nobody was getting schemed open. So it was no one. As I watched it, I absolved Jalen Hurts of just about all fault for last week and the struggles in the passing game. I think Kellen Moore is going to have a better game plan, a more aggressive game plan now that Jalen Hurts is another week removed from the concussion. The Eagles clearly are putting an emphasis on not putting the ball in harm's way, not wanting Jalen Hurts to turn the ball over. Because even if he doesn't have a good game throwing the football, if he doesn't turn the ball over, the Eagles are probably going to win because of the defense that they have. It's that simple. But so if you look at you look at the roster, you look at the talent, you look at recent history, you look at a short week, bad weather. The Eagles are the favorites. They were the better team all season long. The Rams have not been playing out of their minds in recent weeks. As I just told you, the point totals from recent weeks. And the Rams were fully healthy when the Eagles went into Los Angeles to play them a few weeks ago. Let's not forget, they had everybody at their disposal, and the Eagles were without Devontae Smith. And they pushed that team around. It was a dominating performance. How the Rams have not all of a sudden turned into a juggernaut that will come into Philadelphia and knock the Eagles off their skis. Now, can the Rams win this game? Of course they can win this game, right? It's the NFL playoffs. Bigger underdogs than the Rams have won games like this in the past. But I would be utterly shocked. I would be floored if the Eagles don't win this game comfortably. I would be absolutely floored if the Eagles don't win this game by 10 points or more. I really would. I don't know if it'll be as big a blowout as last time. We certainly shouldn't expect Saquon Barkley to have over 300 yards of combined offense in this game. I think it's going to be a big game for A.J. Brown. I think it's going to be a very good game for Devontae Smith and Jalen Hurts. I think Saquon's going to get his near the end. I am a little concerned about the loss of Nakobe Dean. I'll be very interested to see how Jeremiah Trotter Jr. Enters into the chat here in this game against the Rams. But I'm sorry, this Rams team just doesn't scare me all that much. I mean, every playoff game is a little bit scary. I'd be lying to you if I said I wasn't a little bit scared, because I was a little bit scared going into the Packers game last week. Every playoff game is a little bit scary. Even Chiefs fans are a little bit scared of the Texans, right? The Lions have to be a little bit scared of Jaden Daniels and the Commanders. You don't truly know how these teams, how they're going to perform until the game starts. But every objective measure you can look at screams that the Eagles win this game, and they win it rather easily. So that's my prediction. I think the Eagles win this game rather easily. I think they win this game. I'll say they win this thing 30-17. It's a fairly comfortable win for the Birds. I don't think it's close for much of the game. The Eagles pull away in the second half and win and move on to the NFC Championship game. And I like all the home teams to win this week. Don't have to go down through the list. I like the Bills to beat the Ravens. I think that's probably, again, the closest matchup. I picked the Bills to go to the AFC Championship game at the start of the playoffs. You know, I watched the Eagles go into Baltimore and beat up the Ravens. The Ravens, I know they're a hot team. They're a juggernaut team. I think this is the Bills' season to get to the Super Bowl, honestly. I know I picked the Chiefs at the beginning of the Super Bowl run here, but now I'm starting to have second thoughts about that. But I think the Bills will win at home against the Ravens. And I think the Lions win, I think the Chiefs win, and I think the Eagles win on Sunday afternoon, and I don't think it's going to be particularly difficult. All right, everybody, that's going to do it for this edition of Eye on the Enemy. Very exciting times here in Philadelphia. I really hope I'm right about that. I really hope we get another week of talking Eagles football against either the Lions or the Commanders, but they got to take care of business this Sunday afternoon against the Rams. Make sure you listen to all the podcasts here on the Eagles Pin Pull Network. We've got it all covered with X's and O's and shows like this where we're talking key matchups and everything else. Make sure that you're subscribed to the Eagles Pin Pull Network so you get everything. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in. We'll talk to you next time right here on Eye on the Enemy.